The restaurant smelled like expensive perfume and desperation. A combination I'd grown used to after 6 months of working at Lumiere. My fingers ached as I balanced 3 plates of seared duck breast, the heat seeping through the cloth napkin I'd wrapped around my wrist. The kitchen doors swung behind me with their familiar creak, releasing a blast of garlic and thyme into the dining room's carefully cultivated atmosphere of wealth and exclusivity. I was invisible here. That was the point. Women in designer dresses didn't see me as I refilled their wine glasses. Men in custom suits looked through me as I cleared their plates. I was part of the furniture, the scenery, the machine that kept their world running smoothly while I collected tips that barely covered my mother's medical bills and my crumbling studio apartment in the part of the city where streetlights flickered and died. "Table 7 needs water," Marcus hissed as I passed the bar, his perpetually anxious face glistening with sweat. "And the couple at 12 is celebrating an anniversary. Chef wants you to take out the dessert personally." I nodded, my feet screaming in shoes held together with superglue and hope. The dinner rush was ending, that blessed lull between 8:30 and 9 when the kitchen could breathe, and my lower back might stop its constant throbbing. I filled the water pitcher from the station near the kitchen, watching the ice crack and settle, tiny fractures spreading through frozen clarity. That's when I first saw him. He sat alone at table 4, tucked into the corner booth we usually reserve for couples who wanted privacy. But there was no companion across from him, just an empty chair and a single menu lying closed on the white tablecloth. Everything about him seemed carefully unremarkable. A simple button-down shirt, dark jeans, no watch that caught the light, no ring that screamed wealth. His hair was dark, slightly too long, falling across his forehead as he studied his phone with an intensity that made the air around him feel heavier. But it was the stillness that caught my attention. In a restaurant full of animated conversation and laughter, he existed in a pocket of absolute quiet. He didn't fidget, didn't look around for service, just sat there like a predator who had all the time in the world. "Emma!" Sophia's voice cut through my observation. "Your section is blowing up. Move." I tore my gaze away and dove back into the familiar rhythm of service. Smile, nod, recite specials, recommend wine pairings I'd memorized but could never afford to taste. The evening blurred into motion until I found myself approaching table 4 with a water glass, and the subtle dread that came from serving customers who sat alone. Lonely people either wanted to talk your ear off or resented your existence for witnessing their solitude. "Good evening," I said, my customer service voice smooth despite my exhaustion. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" He looked up, and the world tilted. His eyes were dark, not brown, but something deeper, like coffee left too long on the burner until it turned black and bitter. They held mine for a moment longer than necessary, and I felt something cold slide down my spine. Not fear exactly, but recognition of something dangerous dressed in ordinary clothing. "Water's fine." His voice was low, textured like gravel smoothed by years of river current. "For now." I poured with steady hands, though my pulse had picked up its pace. Up close, I could see the details that didn't match his casual appearance, the way his shirt was pressed with military precision, the faint scent of something expensive and woody that didn't come from a department store, the calluses on his hands that spoke of violence rather than honest labor. "Do you need a few more minutes with the menu or—" "I'm waiting for someone." He glanced at his phone again, and something flickered across his face. Annoyance? Calculation? A blind date, actually. The word surprised me. Men who looked like him, like they'd seen things that would make normal people lose sleep, didn't go on blind dates. They didn't need to. "Well, I hope she appreciates Lumiere," I said, falling into the script. "The chef's special tonight is... I'm sure she'll be more interested in what I can afford than what tastes good." The bitterness in his tone made me pause. I should have walked away, moved on to my other tables, stayed invisible. But something about the way he'd said it, like he was testing a theory he already knew the answer to, kept me rooted to the spot. "Then maybe you should order the house salad," I heard myself say. Really establish those low expectations early. His eyes snapped back to mine, and for a heartbeat, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. The air between us grew dense, charged with something that made my throat tight. Then his mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close enough to make my stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. "That's what I'm counting on." Before I could respond, the front door opened with a blast of cold November air and clicking heels. The woman who entered looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Blonde hair in perfect waves, a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and confidence that came from never having to check her bank account before buying coffee. She scanned the restaurant with barely concealed disdain until her eyes landed on table 4. I watched her face cycle through confusion, disappointment, and thinly veiled disgust in the span of 3 seconds. "You must be Vanessa," he said, standing with fluid grace that seemed too controlled, too practiced. "I'm Adrian." "Oh." She didn't hide her assessment of his ordinary clothes, his lack of obvious wealth markers. "Yes. Hi." I became invisible again, the way I was supposed to be, but as I backed away from the table, I caught Adrian's eyes one more time. There was something in them now, dark amusement, mixed with cold certainty, like he was watching a play he'd written himself, knowing exactly how it would end. "I'll give you a few minutes to look at the menu," I said to neither of them in particular. As I walked away, I could hear Vanessa's voice, high and tight with forced enthusiasm. "So, Adrian, what do you do for work?" I didn't hear his response, but I could imagine it. Something vague and unremarkable. Something designed to disappoint. The next 20 minutes were a masterclass in watching someone's hopes die in real time. Every time I approached the table to refill water or take their order, Vanessa's face had grown more pinched, her smiles more plastic. She'd ordered the most expensive items on the menu: the oysters, the lobster tail, a bottle of wine that cost $300, while Adrian had requested a simple pasta dish and water. "You're not drinking?" she'd asked, her tone suggesting this was another mark against him. "I don't drink." Simple. Final. No explanation offered. By the time I brought out their entrees, Vanessa had her phone out, texting under the table with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. She picked at her lobster with visible disdain, as if the food itself had personally offended her by being served in the presence of someone so clearly beneath her expectations. "So, you rent an apartment?" I heard her ask as I set down Adrian's pasta. "In which neighborhood?" "The South Side." Her nose wrinkled. "Oh." That single syllable contained entire libraries of judgment. I'd heard it before, directed at me, at people like me, the ones who didn't matter, who didn't count, who existed only to serve those who did. I glanced at Adrian as I stepped back from the table. He was watching Vanessa with the same stillness I'd noticed before, but now there was something else beneath it, something cold and final, like a door closing on a room you'd never enter again. "Will there be anything else?" I asked. "No," Vanessa said, not looking at me. "Actually, I just remembered I have an early meeting tomorrow. I should go." She stood abruptly, grabbing her designer purse. "It was interesting meeting you, Adrian, but I don't think this is going to work out. You seem like a nice guy, but I'm looking for someone more established, someone with ambition. No offense. None taken." His voice was empty of emotion, carefully neutral. Vanessa didn't even wait for a response. She just turned and walked out, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like gunshots. The door closed behind her, and the restaurant seemed to exhale. I stood frozen, the water pitcher growing heavy in my hands. Adrian sat perfectly still, his pasta untouched, his hands folded on the table like he was praying, but his eyes weren't closed. They were fixed on the empty chair across from him, and the expression on his face made something in my chest constrict. It wasn't hurt. It was vindication, like he'd proved something to himself that he'd already known was true. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "That was cruel." His eyes found mine again, and this time there was no amusement. Just darkness that seemed to pull at something inside me. "People show you who they are," he said. "You just have to give them the right stage." I should have left. Should have cleared Vanessa's barely touched lobster and moved on with my shift. But my feet wouldn't move, and my mouth kept betraying me. "You set her up." It wasn't a question. I gave her an opportunity to be decent. She chose differently. He leaned back in the booth, and for the first time, I noticed the man sitting 3 tables away. He'd been there all night, I realized, nursing a single scotch. His eyes were on Adrian, alert in a way that suggested military training or something worse. "The question is, what would you have done?" "I don't go on blind dates." I tried to keep my voice light, professional. "Can't afford the disappointment or the restaurant bill?" Something shifted in his expression. His eyes traced my face like he was memorizing details. The exhaustion I couldn't hide, the cheap uniform that had been washed so many times the black had faded to gray, the shoes that were probably older than some of the wine in our cellar. "You work hard." "I work." I shrugged, uncomfortable under his scrutiny. "That's what poor people do. And if someone offered you an easy way out?" His voice had changed, become softer but somehow more dangerous. "A rich man who could solve all your problems with his credit card?" The question felt like a test I hadn't studied for. I thought about my mother's hospital bills, stacked on my kitchen counter like a paper monument to everything I couldn't fix. I thought about the leak in my bathroom ceiling that my landlord refused to repair. I thought about eating ramen for the 4th night in a row because groceries were a luxury I couldn't justify. "I'd probably wonder what he wanted in return," I said finally. "Nothing's free, especially not salvation." Adrian's mouth curved into that almost smile again, but this time it reached his eyes. "Smart girl. Emma." Marcus's voice cracked across the restaurant. "Table 12 needs their check." I jumped, suddenly aware that I'd been standing at Adrian's table for far too long. "I should go." He waved a hand, dismissing me. "I'll take my check too." I processed the bill with shaking hands, my mind still caught on the strange conversation. When I returned to table 4, Adrian was standing, pulling bills from his wallet. Not a credit card. Cash. Hundreds, crisp and new. He handed me enough to cover Vanessa's expensive meal and his simple pasta, plus a tip that made my breath catch. $300. More than I made in a week. I can't accept this. I tried to push the money back, but he'd already stepped away from the table. "You gave me an honest answer when you could have lied," he said. "That's worth something." "It's worth $300? To me, tonight? Yes." He started toward the door, and the man 3 tables away stood smoothly, following like a shadow. But Adrian paused at the entrance, looking back at me. "What's your full name?" "Emma." I clutched the bills, still warm from his wallet. "Emma Chen." "Emma Chen." He said it like he was filing it away for later. "Thank you for your service." Then he was gone, disappearing into the November night with his silent companion. I stood in the middle of Lumiere, surrounded by the sounds of satisfied customers and clinking silverware, holding more money than I'd held in months. My hands were trembling. I didn't know then that I'd just made the worst and best mistake of my life. Didn't know that honesty, offered to a stranger in an expensive restaurant, would be the thread that unraveled everything I thought I knew about safety, choice, and freedom. All I knew was that Adrian's eyes had seen through me in a way that made me feel exposed and terrified and, God help me, alive for the first time in years. The money was still in my hands when Marcus approached, his eyes wide. "Holy shit, Emma. Did that guy really tip you $300? "Yeah." My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. He did. Who was he? I looked at the door where Adrian had vanished, remembering the stillness, the watchful companion, the way he'd tested Vanessa like a scientist conducting an experiment. I have no idea, but I would find out. And when I did, I'd wish I'd never asked. The $300 sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days, still folded exactly as Adrian had handed them to me. I couldn't bring myself to deposit the bills or spend them, like touching the money would somehow seal a contract I hadn't agreed to. My studio apartment felt smaller with those crisp hundreds watching me, witnesses to something I didn't understand. Wednesday morning arrived with rain hammering against my single window and a new stack of medical bills shoved under my door. My mother's latest round of physical therapy. The specialist she needed but insurance refused to cover. Numbers that made my stomach clench and my vision blur. I picked up the $300. The bank teller didn't ask questions when I deposited the cash, but I felt like a criminal anyway. Like I'd stolen something more valuable than money. Maybe my own integrity, though I couldn't explain why an honest tip should feel like theft. Work that night was the usual chaos. Lumiere. On a Wednesday meant business dinners and anniversary celebrations, men who treated their bills like dick measuring contests, and women who sent back wine because it wasn't expensive enough. I moved through my section on autopilot, my mind drifting back to dark eyes and dangerous stillness. Emma, you have a walk-in at table 4. My head snapped up. Table 4. The corner booth where Adrian had sat 3 nights ago, orchestrating his little social experiment. But it wasn't Adrian sitting there now. The woman was older, maybe 50, with steel gray hair cut in a severe bob and a pantsuit that screamed power. Her eyes tracked me as I approached, sharp and assessing in a way that made my skin prickle. "Good evening," I said, falling into my script. "Can I start you with something to drink?" Information. Her voice was crisp, businesslike. "You served a man named Adrian here on Sunday night. Dark hair, early 30s, came alone for a blind date." Every instinct screamed at me to lie. "I serve a lot of people. Don't insult my intelligence or waste my time." She pulled out her phone, showing me a photograph. Adrian stared back at me from the screen, but this version wore a custom suit and stood in front of what looked like a corporate building. "Adrian Volkov. You spoke with him. He tipped you $300. I need to know exactly what was said." Volkov. The name detonated in my brain like a grenade. Even I, who avoided the news and kept my head down, knew that name. Volkov Industries. Import-export, they called it in the papers. Everyone else called it what it was, the most powerful crime family on the East Coast, masquerading as legitimate business. My mouth went dry. "I don't know what you're talking about, Ms. Chen." She leaned forward, and I caught the outline of a weapon beneath her jacket. "I'm head of security for Mr. Volkov. 3 days ago, he went on a blind date as part of what he termed a social experiment. He came back to the office in an unusually good mood and has been asking questions about you, your employment history, your address, your mother's medical situation." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "That's illegal." "Yes." She didn't even blink. "But my job isn't to follow laws. It's to protect Mr. Volkov from threats, entanglements, and complications. You, Ms. Chen, have become all 3. "I didn't do anything." My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "He asked me a question. I answered honestly. That's it. Honesty." She said the word like it was a foreign language. "Do you know what Mr. Volkov does for a living?" "I can guess." "Then you understand that honest people are dangerous in his world. They're unpredictable. They can't be bought or controlled or trusted to act in their own self-interest." Her eyes bore into mine. "He's interested in you. That's a problem. So tell him I'm not interested back." I gripped my order pad until my knuckles went white. "Tell him to leave me alone. I've tried. He's not listening." She pulled a business card from her jacket and slid it across the table. When he contacts you, and he will, call this number first. I'll do what I can to minimize the damage. What damage? I'm a waitress. I'm nobody. That's what makes you dangerous. She stood smoothly, leaving $200 bills on the table. Mr. Volkov doesn't understand people like you. He's going to try, and people who get close to him tend to end up collateral damage. Consider this a professional courtesy. Stay away from Adrian Volkov if you value your life. She was gone before I could respond, leaving me alone with her warning and the cold sweat coating my skin. I should have quit that night, should have walked out of Lumiere and disappeared into the parts of the city where people like Adrian Volkov didn't venture. But I needed the money, needed the insurance, needed the familiar rhythm of work to keep me from thinking about dark eyes and dangerous questions. So I stayed. Friday night, the restaurant was packed. I'd almost convinced myself that the woman in the pantsuit had been paranoid, that Adrian had already forgotten about the poor waitress who'd given him an honest answer. I was carrying a tray of champagne flutes to a birthday party when I saw him. He sat at the bar this time, dressed differently. A charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car, if I'd owned a car. But it was the same stillness, the same gravity that bent the air around him. And he was watching me. The champagne flutes rattled on my tray. I delivered the drinks with trembling hands, hyper-aware of his gaze following my movement. When I finally had no choice but to approach the bar for a wine order, he was waiting. Emma Chen. Not a question. A statement of fact, like he'd been rehearsing my name. Mr. Volkov. I kept my voice neutral, professional. Can I get you something? Answers. He gestured to the empty stool beside him. Sit. I'm working. Marcus gave you a 15-minute break. His eyes flicked to the manager's office. I asked. Of course he had. Men like Adrian Volkov didn't ask for things. They arranged them. I glanced around the restaurant, looking for the security woman, for help, for any excuse to run. But Marcus was nodding at me from across the room, making shooing motions. I sat, my body rigid, maintaining 6 inches of space between us. You've been researching me, I said quietly. That's creepy. I'm thorough. He signaled the bartender, who immediately poured 2 glasses of water without being asked. You have questions. I'll answer them. I don't want answers. I want you to leave me alone. Liar. The word was soft, but absolute. You're terrified, but you're also curious. You've been wondering why I staged that dinner with Vanessa, why I tipped you so much, why I'm here now. He was right, and I hated him for it. Fine. Why? Because you passed a test you didn't know you were taking. He took a sip of water, his movements controlled and precise. Do you know how many people I can trust in my life, Emma? The real number? I don't care about your life. 4. He continued like I hadn't spoken. 4 people out of thousands of employees, associates, and contacts. 4 people who won't sell me out for the right price or betray me when it's convenient. I've spent the last 15 years building an empire on the assumption that everyone is corruptible. Then you came along. And proved what? That poor people have morals? Congratulations on discovering basic human decency. His mouth twitched. You're angry. Your security chief threatened me at my workplace. She said being around you makes people collateral damage. So yeah, I'm fucking angry. The profanity slipped out, unprofessional, but I was beyond caring. I don't want to be part of whatever experiment you're running. I want to work, pay my bills, and survive. That's it. What if I could make surviving easier? There it was. The offer I'd known was coming since the moment he'd sat down. The trap dressed as salvation. I'm not sleeping with you for money. I'm not asking you to. He turned on the stool to face me fully, and the intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. I'm asking you to marry me. The restaurant sounds faded to white noise. Somewhere, glass shattered. Someone laughed. But all I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears and the impossible words hanging between us. You're insane. I'm practical. He pulled out his phone, showing me what looked like a legal document. I need a wife. Not for love or companionship or any of the usual reasons. I need someone I can trust not to betray me, who won't be blinded by money or status, who can be themselves in a world full of people wearing masks. You don't know me. I stood up, needing distance. You spoke to me for 10 minutes. I know you work 60-hour weeks to pay for your mother's medical care. I know you've been rejected for 3 different loans to cover her surgery. I know you eat 1 meal a day so you can send her the rest of your paycheck. I know you're drowning, Emma, and you're too proud to ask for help. He stood too, and suddenly he was too close, his presence overwhelming. I'm offering you a life raft. In exchange for what? Your presence, your honesty, your willingness to stand beside me at events and functions where I need someone who won't try to poison my drink or sell information to my enemies. His voice dropped lower, intimate, despite the public setting. I'll pay for your mother's surgery, every medical bill, every treatment, every specialist. I'll set up a trust that ensures she's cared for regardless of what happens to me. You'll have your own bank account, your own money, complete financial independence. All you have to do is wear a ring and pretend to love me in public. It was too much. Too fast. Too impossible. And in private? In private, you live your life. I'll live mine. We'll coexist in the same space without obligation or expectation. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. Not a ring box. Something else. But I need your answer now. My enemies are circling, and I need to project stability. A wife sends a message that I'm settled, thinking long-term, not worth challenging. So I'm a prop. You're a solution. He opened the box, revealing a phone. This is a secure line. If you say yes, you take it. If you say no, you walk away, and I'll have $250,000 deposited in your account by morning as compensation for the inconvenience. $250,000 for saying no, for walking away from the most insane proposal I'd ever heard. I thought about my mother, withering in that care facility because I couldn't afford the surgery that might give her mobility back. I thought about the debt collectors who called at 3 a.m, threatening legal action. I thought about the exhaustion that had become my constant companion, the way hope had turned into something I couldn't afford to feel. And I thought about Adrian's eyes, dark and dangerous, and somehow seeing me when the rest of the world looked through me like I was invisible. This is crazy. Yes. He didn't argue. You could have anyone. Models, actresses, women who actually know how to navigate your world. I don't trust anyone. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Except apparently a waitress who told me the truth when she could have lied. My hand moved before my brain approved the decision. I took the phone from the box, feeling its weight. Heavier than it should be, like it was made of consequence instead of metal and glass. I need guarantees, contracts, proof that you'll do what you're promising. My lawyers will have everything ready by tomorrow. Something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. We'll marry by the end of the week. Jesus Christ, I laughed, high and slightly hysterical. This is actually happening. Emma. He caught my wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough that I couldn't pull away. His skin was warm, his grip controlled. You need to understand what you're agreeing to. My world is violent. I have enemies who would hurt you to hurt me. I have allies who would betray me for the right price. Being my wife, even in name only, puts a target on your back. The security woman already explained that. Good. Then you know what you're walking into. He released my wrist but didn't step back. One more thing. The marriage stays secret for now. To everyone outside my inner circle, you're still just Emma Chen, waitress. Until the wedding, we keep this quiet. Why? Because I need to control the narrative, need to make sure my enemies don't have time to use you against me before you're protected by my name. His jaw tightened. Trust me, Emma. I've thought this through. I looked down at the phone in my hands, then back up at the man who'd just bought my life with a proposal and promises I couldn't verify. If you're lying to me, I'm not. He pulled out his wallet, extracting a business card. That's my personal lawyer. Call him tonight. Ask him anything. He'll confirm every word I've said. Then he was walking away, his security detail materializing from the shadows to flank him. The restaurant door closed behind them with a soft click, and I was left standing by the bar, holding a phone that felt like a bomb, and a business card that might as well have been a contract written in blood. Marcus appeared at my elbow. Emma? You okay? You look pale. I'm fine. The lie tasted bitter. Just need some air. I walked outside into the November cold, my uniform jacket doing nothing against the wind. The phone in my pocket hummed, a text message lighting up the screen. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., my lawyer's office. Come alone. Below it, an address in the financial district, the part of the city where buildings touched clouds and people like me only existed to clean the floors. I should have thrown the phone in the nearest trash can. Should have called the police or my mother, or anyone who could talk sense into me. Instead, I saved the number and walked back inside to finish my shift. Because the truth was, I'd already decided. The moment Adrian had mentioned my mother's surgery, had seen through my carefully constructed walls to the desperation beneath, I'd been caught. Not by force or manipulation, but by the simple, terrible recognition that I was out of options. And men like Adrian Volkov knew exactly how to exploit that kind of desperation. I just didn't realize yet that I'd been cast in a role I couldn't escape, in a story that had been written long before I'd served him water at table 4. The trap had already closed. I'd walked in voluntarily. The lawyer's office occupied the 42nd floor of a glass tower that reflected clouds and money in equal measure. I'd taken 3 buses to get there. My only professional outfit, a thrift store blazer and pants that didn't quite match, feeling like a costume in a building where even the security guards wore better shoes than me. Ms. Chen. The receptionist's smile was polished and empty. Mr. Volkov is expecting you. Conference room 3. Not the lawyer. Adrian himself. I followed her down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than my mother's surgery, my heart hammering against my ribs. The conference room door was solid mahogany, heavy enough to muffle sound, thick enough to keep secrets. Adrian stood by the window, silhouetted against the morning sun. He'd shed his jacket, his white shirt crisp and tailored to emphasize shoulders that suggested he did more than sit behind a desk. When he turned, I saw the exhaustion in his eyes, like he hadn't slept since our conversation. You came. Relief colored his voice. You didn't give me much choice. There's always a choice, Emma. He gestured to the table where documents were spread like a paper minefield. Sit, read, ask questions. I sat because my legs were shaking. The contracts were dense with legal language, but the basics were clear enough. Marriage for 3 years, renewable if both parties agreed. Complete financial independence. My own accounts, my own credit cards, no oversight or control from Adrian. My mother's medical care fully covered, plus a monthly stipend of $20,000 for my personal expenses. $20,000. Every month. For 3 years. The numbers made my vision swim. This clause, I pointed to Section 7. It says I can't discuss the nature of our arrangement with anyone outside the approved circle. What if I need help? What if something goes wrong? My lawyer and my head of security are both approved contacts. They'll help you navigate anything you need. Adrian moved to sit across from me, his movements controlled. But you're right to question it. The confidentiality is for your protection as much as mine. If word gets out that our marriage is transactional, my enemies will see you as a weakness to exploit rather than a legitimate spouse to respect. And the living arrangements? My penthouse has 6 bedrooms. You'll have your own suite, bedroom, bathroom, office space, complete privacy. I travel frequently for business, so you'll often have the place to yourself. I flipped through more pages, looking for the trap I knew had to be hiding in the fine print. What about dating? Relationships outside the marriage? His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Publicly, you're my wife. That means discretion is required. I won't restrict your personal life, but any relationships must be kept absolutely private. No public displays, no social media, nothing that could embarrass or undermine the marriage. And you? Same rules apply? I don't date. He said it flatly, like stating a fact about the weather. Haven't in years. This arrangement doesn't change that. There it was. The edge of something deeper. Some wound he kept buried under stillness and control. I wanted to ask why. Wanted to understand what made a man who could have anyone choose to have no one. But his eyes warned me away from that territory. When would the wedding happen? Saturday. Private ceremony. Just witnesses. My family will be informed afterward. He pulled out another document. This is the prenuptial agreement. In the event of divorce, you keep everything I've given you plus a settlement of $5 million. $5 million. The words didn't feel real. Why so much? Because you'll have earned it. Surviving 3 years in my world is worth that and more. He leaned forward, and I caught the scent of his cologne. Something dark and expensive. I need you to understand, Emma. This isn't some pretty woman fantasy. I'm not going to fall in love with you. You're not going to save me or fix me or discover I'm secretly a good man underneath. This is a business transaction that benefits both of us. The bluntness should have hurt. Instead, it felt like honesty in a conversation that desperately needed it. What happens if I say no right now? Walk out? I transfer the $250,000 to your account as promised. You go back to Lumiere, back to your life. And I find another solution. His jaw tightened. But your mother doesn't get the surgery. The debt collectors keep calling. And 6 months from now, you'll be in exactly the same place you are now. Drowning slowly. Too proud to ask for help. You're an asshole. Yes. No argument. No apology. But I'm an honest asshole offering you a way out. I looked down at the contracts, at the promise of security written in legal jargon and Adrian's sharp, controlled signature. My mother's face floated through my mind. The way she'd smiled before the accident, before medical bills and chronic pain had stolen her future. I need to see her first. My mother. Need to explain something. A car will take you this afternoon. I've already contacted the facility's director. Your mother is being transferred to St. Catherine's Medical Center for evaluation by their top neurological team. The words hit me like a physical blow. You can't just, I can and I have. Whether you sign these contracts or not, she's getting the care she needs. Consider it a gesture of good faith. He stood, pulling on his jacket with practiced efficiency. The car will pick you up at 1. Take the contracts with you. Read them again. Make your decision. This is manipulation. This is me proving I keep my promises. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. I'll see you tomorrow, Emma, one way or another. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with documents that felt like chains disguised as liberation. St. Catherine's Medical Center smelled like antiseptic and new money. My mother's new room had windows that actually opened, furniture that didn't look like it belonged in a prison, and equipment that appeared to have been manufactured this century. She was sleeping when I arrived, her face peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in months. The nurse who'd been checking her vitals looked up with a smile. Ms. Chen? Your mother's been asking for you. The doctors say she's an excellent candidate for the new treatment protocol. I sank into the chair beside her bed, taking her hand. It felt fragile, bird-boned and cool. Emma? Her eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly. "Where am I?" "Somewhere better, Mom." My voice cracked. "You're going to get the surgery. Everything's going to be okay." "How?" She squeezed my fingers weakly. "Baby, we can't afford—" "Don't worry about it. I have a new opportunity, a better job." The lie tasted like ash, but what was the truth? That I was marrying a criminal to pay for her medical care? That I was selling myself in a transaction dressed up as salvation? We talked for an hour, her voice growing stronger as pain medication and hope worked in tandem. She told me about the physical therapist who'd visited that morning, about the doctor who'd explained the surgery in terms she could understand. She looked younger, lighter, like someone had lifted a weight I hadn't realized was crushing her. And I knew then that I couldn't walk away. Couldn't let her slip back into that underfunded facility where hope went to die. Adrian had made the decision for me by showing me exactly what I stood to lose. The bastard. Saturday morning arrived wrapped in fog and dread. The car that picked me up was black and sleek, bulletproof glass and leather seats that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The driver didn't speak, just opened my door with practiced precision and drove through streets I barely recognized. The courthouse was old stone and marble, the kind of building that had witnessed 1,000 marriages and divorces. Adrian waited on the steps, flanked by 2 people I didn't recognize. A man in his 60s with kind eyes, and a woman about my age with suspicious ones. "Emma." Adrian descended the steps, and I noticed he'd dressed down deliberately. No custom suit, just dark slacks and a simple button-down, making me feel less out of place in my cheap dress. "This is Victor, my lawyer, and Sophia, my head of security. They'll serve as witnesses." "Sophia, the woman from Lumiere." She nodded at me with something that might have been grudging respect. "Let's get this done." I clutched my small purse, the contracts I'd signed tucked inside like incriminating evidence. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. We stood before a bored judge who recited vows neither of us meant, exchanged rings that felt heavier than they should, and signed documents that made the transaction legal. When the judge pronounced us married, Adrian didn't kiss me, just nodded, professional and distant. "Congratulations," Victor said, shaking both our hands. "May you have a successful partnership." Not a happy marriage, a successful partnership. Outside, Adrian gestured to a different car, this one larger, more obviously armored. "We need to go to the penthouse, get you moved in. All my stuff fits in 2 suitcases. Something flickered across his face. "Then this won't take long." The penthouse occupied the top floor of a building in the financial district, the kind of address that appeared in magazines featuring "How Billionaires Live" articles. The elevator required a key card and retinal scan. The doors opened directly into a foyer larger than my entire apartment. "Your suite is down this hall." Adrian led me through rooms that felt more like a museum than a home. Everything was minimalist and expensive. Leather, steel, glass that reflected back my terrified face. I had some basics brought in, but you can redecorate however you want. My suite was 3 rooms of absurd luxury. The bedroom had a bed the size of my old apartment, windows overlooking the city, and a closet already filled with clothes in my size. "I didn't buy those," Adrian said quickly, noticing my expression. "Sophia did. She said you'd need appropriate attire for public appearances. If you don't like them, they're fine." I touched a silk blouse, feeling the quality. "This is all just overwhelming." "I know." He leaned against the doorframe, maintaining distance. "Take today to settle in. Tomorrow, Sophia will begin security training." "Security training?" How to spot threats, how to move through crowds safely, what to do if someone tries to grab you. His voice went cold. "Being my wife makes you a target, Emma. I need you prepared." The reality of it crashed over me like cold water. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was survival training for a war I hadn't known I was enlisting in. "Adrian." I turned to face him fully. "Why me? Really? You could have found someone already trained, already in your world. Why drag in a waitress who doesn't know anything? He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching my face like he was trying to read something written in invisible ink. Because everyone in my world wants something from me. Power, money, connections, protection. He pushed off the door frame, taking a step closer. You just wanted to survive. That's the difference. That's why I trust you. You don't know me well enough to trust me. No, he smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut, but I'm going to. Then he left me alone in my golden cage, surrounded by luxury I hadn't earned, and wearing a ring that felt like a shackle disguised as jewelry. I walked to the window, looking down at the city spread below like a circuit board of lights and lives. Somewhere down there was the restaurant where I'd served water and dreams of escape. Somewhere down there was the girl I'd been 4 days ago, before Adrian Volkov had looked at me and seen something worth buying. I touched the ring on my finger, platinum and diamonds, understated but unmistakably expensive. Mrs. Volkov. The name felt like a lie I'd have to learn to tell convincingly. The first week of marriage felt like living in a luxury hotel, where I was both guest and prisoner. Adrian disappeared for long stretches. Business, he said, though the way Sophia's jaw tightened suggested the business involved more than boardrooms and contracts. I spent my days learning how to exist in his world, memorizing the layout of the penthouse, trying not to break anything that cost more than my life. Sophia arrived every morning at 8 sharp, armed with lessons I never wanted to learn. Someone grabs your arm in a crowd, she said, demonstrating with efficient brutality. You twist like this, drop your weight, and run. Don't fight, don't be a hero. Just survive and get to security. We practiced in the penthouse gym, another room of glass and steel that overlooked the city like a throne room. She taught me how to spot surveillance, how to identify exits, how to recognize the subtle signs that something was wrong. Her methods were clinical, professional, but underneath I sensed something protective. You think I'm paranoid? She said during our 4th session, reading my expression. I think this is insane. I wiped sweat from my forehead. I'm a waitress pretending to be a mob wife. Nobody's going to care about me. Adrian cares about you. That makes you valuable. She handed me a water bottle. 3 months ago, a rival family kidnapped the girlfriend of one of our associates. They sent her back in pieces to make a point. The water turned to acid in my stomach. Jesus Christ. This is the world you married into. Adrian's trying to protect you by keeping the marriage quiet, but eventually people will find out. When they do, you need to be ready. Her eyes softened fractionally. I don't like this arrangement. I think Adrian's making a mistake. But you seem decent, and I don't want to see you hurt because he was lonely and impulsive. He wasn't lonely. He was practical. Keep telling yourself that. She moved to the door, then paused. For what it's worth, he's different around you. Calmer. That's either very good or very dangerous. I haven't decided which. After she left, I stood in the gym, surrounded by equipment I didn't know how to use, trying to process the reality that my life now included phrases like sent back in pieces. My phone buzzed. The secure one Adrian had given me. A text from an unknown number. Dinner tonight. 7 p.m. Wear something nice. We're going out. A going out, as in public, as in the debut of Mrs. Volkov, even if nobody knew that's who I was. I spent 2 hours agonizing over the clothes Sophia had provided, finally settling on a simple black dress that didn't scream, trying too hard. The woman who looked back at me from the mirror was a stranger, polished and elegant, wearing confidence like borrowed clothing. Adrian appeared at 6:50, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than a car. But it was the way he looked at me that made my breath catch. A long, assessing gaze that traveled from my face to my shoes and back again. You look terrified. I am terrified. I grabbed my purse, a designer thing Sophia had insisted was necessary. Where are we going? Valentino's. Italian place in Little Italy. Good food, better security, and enough of my people in the neighborhood that we can eat in relative peace. He offered his arm with old-fashioned formality. Breathe, Emma. We're just having dinner. Nothing with you is just anything. His mouth curved. You're learning. The restaurant was exactly as he'd described. Intimate, expensive, and filled with people who nodded at Adrian with respect that bordered on fear. We were seated at a back table, positioned so Adrian could see the entrance and exits. 2 men I recognized from the penthouse sat nearby, pretending to have their own conversation. Tell me about your mother. Adrian said it casually, like we were a normal couple on a normal date. She's doing well. The doctors say the surgery went better than expected. I studied the menu, not really seeing it. She asked about you, about my new job. What did you tell her? That I'm working as a personal assistant for a businessman, that the pay is good and the hours are flexible. The lie had come easily, practiced in the mirror until it sounded true. She's happy. That's what matters. You're a good daughter. I'm a desperate daughter. There's a difference. The waiter appeared, reciting specials in Italian that Adrian answered fluently. After we ordered, he leaned back, studying me with that unnerving intensity. You hate this. Being here. Playing this role. I'm grateful for what you've done for my mother. I chose my words carefully, but yes, I hate pretending to be something I'm not. What do you think you're pretending to be? Someone who belongs in your world. Someone who knows which fork to use and how to make small talk with criminals dressed as businessmen. I took a sip of water. I wait tables, Adrian. This time last month I was eating ramen and wondering if I could afford bus fare. And now you have $20,000 deposited in your account every month. So what's the problem? The question sparked something hot in my chest. The problem is that none of this is real. The marriage, the money, this dinner. It's all theater. And I'm a terrible actress. Then stop acting. He leaned forward, voice dropping. You want to know why I chose you? It wasn't because I thought you'd play the role perfectly. It was because you're incapable of being anyone but yourself. That's what I need, Emma. Someone real in a world of liars. You barely know me. I know you work until your feet bleed. I know you've sacrificed everything for your mother. I know you looked at $300 like it was $1 million because that's how far you were from drowning. His eyes held mine. I know you're honest even when lying would be easier. That's enough. The food arrived, interrupting whatever I might have said. We ate in tense silence, the pasta turning to sawdust in my mouth. Around us, the restaurant hummed with conversation and the clink of silverware. Normal people having normal evenings. We were halfway through the meal when the door opened and everything changed. The woman who entered was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Tall and blonde, wearing confidence like a second skin. But it was the way Adrian's body went rigid, the way his hand moved fractionally towards something under his jacket that told me this wasn't a coincidence. Adrian. She approached our table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How lovely to see you out and about. And with company. Vanessa. His voice could have frozen fire. I thought I made myself clear. Vanessa. The gold digger from the blind date. The woman who'd walked out when she thought Adrian was poor. Oh, you did. Very clear. Her gaze slid to me, assessing and dismissive in equal measure. But then I heard the most interesting rumor. Something about you getting married, to a waitress of all things. I had to see if it was true. My stomach dropped. She knew. Somehow she knew. I don't know what you're talking about. Adrian's tone was casual, but his shoulders were tight. This is Emma, a business associate. Really? Vanessa pulled out her phone, showing us a photograph. It was from the courthouse, grainy and taken from a distance, but unmistakably Adrian and me exchanging rings. Because this looks remarkably like a wedding to me. The restaurant had gone quiet. People were watching now, sensing drama the way predators sense blood. "Where did you get that?" Adrian's voice dropped to something dangerous. "A friend of a friend. Apparently you're not as careful as you think you are." She tucked the phone away, triumphant. "Does anyone else know? Your family? Your rivals? Or is this little secret just between us?" Adrian stood slowly, and I realized I was seeing something new. Rage, barely controlled, wrapped in terrifying stillness. "What do you want?" "Oh, Adrian, I just want what I've always wanted." She smiled. "I want you to know that you made a mistake, that I'm the one who got away, and that no amount of money or power can buy what we could have had." "We had nothing. You made that clear." I made a mistake. For the first time, something genuine flickered across her face. "I was young and stupid and focused on the wrong things, but you're still punishing me for it. Marrying some nobody to prove a point. Emma isn't nobody." The words came out sharp, protective. "And I didn't marry her to prove anything to you. Then why?" Vanessa's voice rose. "Why her? What does she have that I don't? A soul." Adrian threw down cash, way more than necessary, and grabbed my hand. "We're leaving." He pulled me toward the door, his security materializing to flank us. But Vanessa's voice followed, cutting through the restaurant's shocked silence. "This isn't over, Adrian. Everyone's going to know. Your family, your enemies, everyone. And when they do, they're going to come for her. Your pretty little waitress won't last a month in your world." The night air hit me like a slap. Adrian's hand was still wrapped around mine, his grip just short of painful. The car was already waiting, Sophia at the wheel with an expression that promised violence. "Get in," Adrian said tersely. I climbed into the back seat, my mind racing. The marriage was supposed to be secret. That was the whole point. Keep me safe until Adrian could control the narrative. But Vanessa had destroyed that plan with a single photograph. Adrian slid in beside me, pulling out his phone. "Victor, we have a problem. Vanessa Chen has proof of the marriage, and she's threatening to leak it." "Yes, the same Vanessa. I don't give a fuck how she found out. Fix it." He hung up, his jaw clenched so tight, I could see the muscle jumping. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "This is my fault." "How is this your fault? I'm the one who suggested you order house salad. I engaged with you that night instead of staying professional. If I'd just... Emma." He turned to face me, and his eyes were blazing. "This is not your fault. Vanessa is bitter and vindictive, and she's trying to hurt me by exposing you. That's on her, not you." "But she's right. Your family doesn't know. Your enemies don't know. When they find out, then we make the announcement ourselves, on our terms, not hers." He took a breath, visibly forcing himself to calm. "Tomorrow we're having dinner with my family. You're going to meet my father, my uncle, and my cousin, and you're going to be introduced as my wife." Terror clawed up my throat. "Adrian, I'm not ready." "Neither am I." He reached out, cupping my face with surprising gentleness. "But ready or not, the secret's out. Now we deal with the consequences." His thumb brushed my cheek, and I realized I was shaking, not from fear exactly, but from the overwhelming reality that my life had just been thrown into the public arena. What if they hate me? "They will." He said it matter-of-factly. "My father will think you're a gold digger. My uncle will think you're a spy. My cousin will probably try to bribe you to leave. But you're going to hold your head up and remember that you're my wife. That gives you power they have to respect." "I don't feel powerful. I feel like a target." "Good." His hand dropped away. "Fear will keep you alert. Just remember, you're not alone in this anymore. Whatever happens, I protect what's mine." The possessiveness in his tone should have been alarming. Instead, it felt like the first solid ground I'd found since Vanessa had walked into that restaurant. Sophia pulled up to the penthouse, and we rode the elevator in silence. When we reached the foyer, Adrian finally spoke again. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult." Adrian. I caught his arm before he could disappear. Thank you for defending me back there. Something softened in his expression. You're my wife, Emma. Even if it started as a transaction, you're under my protection now. That means something. He left me standing in the foyer, my hand still tingling from where he'd held it. My mind spinning with the realization that somewhere between signing contracts and sharing dinner, the lines had started to blur. This was supposed to be business, but the way Adrian had looked at Vanessa, with cold fury and protective rage, suggested business had become dangerously personal. The Volkov family estate sat 40 minutes outside the city, hidden behind gates that could stop a tank and surrounded by woods that probably concealed more security than guards at Fort Knox. Sophia drove in tense silence, occasionally glancing at me in the rearview mirror like she was calculating my odds of survival. Don't show fear, she said as we approached the mansion. Adrian's father respects strength. His uncle respects cunning. His cousin respects nothing, so ignore whatever he says. That's incredibly unhelpful. Welcome to the family. She pulled up to the entrance, where Adrian waited on the steps. He'd dressed for battle. A suit that screamed authority, his hair slicked back, every inch the crime lord rather than the man who'd pretended to be poor on a blind date. He opened my door himself, offering his hand. Remember what we discussed. You're my wife. You belong here. Don't apologize. Don't explain. Don't show weakness. I'm terrified. I know. He squeezed my hand once, quick and reassuring. But you've survived poverty and debt collectors in my world for a week. You can survive dinner with my family. The mansion's interior was all dark wood and expensive art. The kind of place where ancestors frowned from oil paintings and secrets soaked into the walls. Voices drifted from a dining room, Russian mixed with English, laughter that sounded more like a threat than joy. Adrian's hand settled on my lower back, proprietary and protective. Ready? I nodded, lying through my teeth. The dining room fell silent when we entered. 3 men sat at a table that could seat 20, their eyes tracking us with predatory focus. The oldest, Adrian's father, I assumed, looked like a weathered version of his son, all sharp angles and cold calculation. The uncle was softer, rounder, but his eyes were the most dangerous thing in the room. The cousin was young, maybe 25, with the kind of pretty boy face that disguised cruelty. Father, Uncle Mikhail, Alexei. Adrian's voice was formal, distant. I'd like you to meet Emma, my wife. The silence stretched like taffy, sticky and suffocating. Then Adrian's father laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Your wife. You married a waitress without telling your family. I married someone I trust. That's more than most men in our business can say. Adrian pulled out a chair for me, the gesture both chivalrous and a clear statement of possession. Emma, this is my father, Victor, my uncle Mikhail, and my cousin Alexei. It's nice to meet you. The words came out steadier than I felt. Victor's eyes dissected me like I was something under a microscope. Nice. She thinks it's nice. He turned to Adrian. Have you lost your mind? Do you know what this looks like? The heir to the Volkov Empire marrying some girl from the streets? She's not from the streets. She worked 3 jobs to support her disabled mother. She has more integrity than half the women in our circle. Adrian sat beside me, his body angled protectively. The marriage is done. Legal and binding. I'm not here to ask permission. I'm informing you as a courtesy. Courtesy. Mikhail spoke for the first time, his voice oily and smooth. Is that what we're calling it? You marry in secret, and then some vindictive woman threatens to expose it, forcing you to bring this girl into the family fold. That's not courtesy, Adrian. That's damage control. So they already knew about Vanessa. Of course they did. Vanessa is being handled, Adrian said coldly. By handled, you mean what exactly? Alexei leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. Are we disappearing her, paying her off, or are we letting her run her mouth to whoever will listen? She'll be convinced that silence is in her best interest. Adrian's tone suggested exactly how that convincing would happen. I felt sick. This was the world I'd married into, where problems were solved with threats and violence, where a jealous ex-girlfriend might just disappear for knowing too much. And what about her? Victor pointed at me like I was furniture. What happens when she decides to run her mouth? When she gets tired of playing dress-up and wants to cash out? Then she'll collect the settlement detailed in our prenup and leave quietly. Adrian's voice was steady, but I felt his hand find mine under the table. But that won't happen. Emma understands loyalty, something this family seems to have forgotten. The barb landed. Victor's face darkened, and Mikhail's eyes narrowed. Careful, nephew. Mikhail said softly. You may be heir, but you're not king yet. And kings who make stupid decisions tend to have short reigns. The threat hung in the air, crystal clear. I squeezed Adrian's hand, trying to convey something. Caution, maybe, or solidarity. His fingers tightened around mine. Is that a threat against my wife? It's a statement of fact. Mikhail gestured to a servant, who began bringing out food. But since the marriage is done, we might as well eat. Emma, tell us about yourself. What makes you worthy of the Volkov name? It was a trap disguised as polite conversation. Every eye at the table was on me, waiting for me to fail. I don't know if I'm worthy, I said carefully. But I'm loyal. I keep my promises, and I understand that family takes care of its own. Adrian helped my mother when no one else would. That kind of loyalty deserves loyalty in return. How touching. Alexei's smirk widened. She thinks this is about loyalty. Adrian, did you tell her what happened to the last person who betrayed our family? Alexei. The warning in Adrian's voice could have cut glass. What? She should know. Marco was Uncle Mikhail's most trusted lieutenant. 20 years of service. Then we found out he was skimming money, thinking he was clever enough to get away with it. Alexei leaned forward, his eyes on me. They found pieces of him scattered across 3 states. Took his family 6 months to bury him. My stomach lurched. Adrian's hand was crushing mine now, but I forced myself to hold Alexei's gaze. Then it's a good thing I'm not stupid enough to betray the people who've helped me. Victor laughed again, but this time it sounded almost approving. She has spine. I'll give her that. He raised his glass. To Adrian's new wife. May she be smarter than she looks. The dinner that followed was a careful dance of veiled insults and political maneuvering. They tested me with questions about my background, my intentions, my understanding of their business. I deflected when I could, answered honestly when I couldn't, and tried not to think about body parts scattered across 3 states. By the time dessert arrived, I was exhausted, my nerves scraped raw. Excuse me. I stood, needing air, needing space. Where's the bathroom? Down the hall, 2nd door on the left. Adrian half rose, but I waved him back down. I can find it. The hallway was a relief, quiet and empty, free from eyes that saw me as either threat or prey. I found the bathroom and locked myself inside, bracing against the sink and trying to remember how to breathe. This was my life now. Dinners with criminals, threats disguised as conversation. The constant awareness that one wrong word could get someone killed. When I finally emerged, Alexei was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall with studied casualness. So, he blocked my path. How much? Excuse me? How much to walk away? Name your price. I'll have it transferred tonight. His eyes traveled over me with open disdain. You're pretty enough, I suppose, but you're not Adrian's type. This whole thing is obviously some kind of scheme. So let's skip the pretense and get to the number. Anger sparked in my chest, hot and clarifying. I'm not for sale. Everyone's for sale. It's just a question of price. He stepped closer, invading my space. 5 million? 10? Tell me what it takes to make you disappear. It takes nothing, because I'm not going anywhere. I met his eyes, refusing to back down. I'm Adrian's wife. That might not mean anything to you, but it means something to me. How noble. His hand shot out, grabbing my arm hard enough to bruise. Let me explain how this works, waitress. Adrian's going soft, marrying you, protecting you, acting like you're something precious instead of a transaction. That makes him weak, and weak leaders get replaced. Let go of me. Or what? You'll tell Adrian. He's so busy defending your honor he's forgotten that sentiment is dangerous in our world. His grip tightened. You're a liability, and liabilities get eliminated. I said let go. I twisted, using the move Sophia had taught me, and felt satisfaction when Alexei stumbled back. But the satisfaction died when I saw his expression, rage mixed with something darker, more violent. His hand moved toward his jacket, toward what I knew was a weapon, and time seemed to slow. Then Adrian was there. I hadn't heard him approach, hadn't seen him move, but suddenly he was between us. His hand wrapped around Alexei's wrist with enough force to make his cousin gasp. You touched her. Adrian's voice was arctic. You threatened her. You were just what? Testing her? Trying to prove a point? Adrian twisted Alexei's arm, forcing him to his knees. She's my wife. That means she's untouchable. You don't speak to her. You don't look at her. And you sure as hell don't put your hands on her. Adrian, you're making a mistake. The only mistake is thinking my family has any say in who I marry or how I protect her. He released Alexei with a shove that sent him sprawling. Get out. You're not welcome in my home or my life until you learn respect. Alexei scrambled up, his face twisted with humiliation and fury. He looked at me once, a glance full of promise that this wasn't over, then disappeared down the hallway. Adrian turned to me, his hands gentle as they cupped my face. Are you hurt? No, just scared. I was shaking, adrenaline and shock making my words tremble. He said you're going soft, that I'm making you weak. He's wrong. Adrian's thumbs brushed my cheeks. You're not making me weak. You're making me remember why any of this matters. I don't understand. I've spent 15 years building an empire on fear and violence, surrounding myself with people who'd betray me for the right price, never trusting, never letting anyone close. His eyes searched mine. Then you came along with your honesty and your stubbornness and your complete inability to be anything but yourself. And for the first time in my life, I have something worth protecting, beyond just power and money. The words hung between us, dangerous and impossibly honest. Adrian, this was supposed to be a transaction, I know. He leaned his forehead against mine. But somewhere between the courthouse and tonight, it stopped being just business for me. I can't tell you when it happened. Maybe when Vanessa tried to humiliate you and you held your ground. Maybe when you stood up to my family without flinching. Or maybe it was that first night, when you told me the truth instead of what I wanted to hear. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. What are you saying? I'm saying this marriage might have started as convenience, but I'll be damned if I let it stay that way. His hand slid down to my shoulders, steadying and possessive. I'm saying that you're mine, Emma. Not because I bought you or because we signed contracts, but because I choose you, and I need to know if you can choose me back, knowing everything you know about my world. It was the worst possible time for this conversation. We were standing in his family's mansion, surrounded by people who wanted me gone, after his cousin had just threatened my life. But looking into Adrian's eyes, dark and dangerous and somehow vulnerable, I realized the answer had been building since the moment he'd defended me at that dinner table. I choose you. The words felt like jumping off a cliff. Not the money or the security or the protection. You. The man who staged a blind date to prove people are shallow, then married a waitress because she told him the truth. The man who's terrifying and gentle in equal measure. I choose you, Adrian Volkov. He kissed me then, not soft or questioning, but claiming. His mouth was demanding, tasting like wine and possession, and I kissed him back with equal fervor. Everything that had been simmering between us since that first night exploded into something that felt inevitable, like we'd been heading toward this moment through every careful word and loaded glance. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were blazing. "We're leaving. Now." He took my hand and pulled me back toward the dining room, where his father and uncle still sat over drinks. Victor looked up, his expression knowing. Handled the situation, I see. Alexei crossed a line. He's not welcome until he apologizes to Emma. Adrian's tone brooked no argument. And I'm making this clear to everyone. Emma is my wife in every sense of the word. Anyone who threatens her, insults her, or tries to buy her off answers to me personally. Mikhail studied us with calculating eyes. You're serious about her, completely. Then I suppose we'll have to accept it. Victor stood, moving toward us with the fluid grace of a predator. He stopped in front of me, his eyes doing that dissecting thing again. You're braver than I thought, girl. Stupider, too, for choosing this life. But if Adrian trusts you, I'll respect that. For now. It wasn't approval, but it wasn't outright hostility either. I'd take it. Sophia drove us home in charged silence. Adrian kept my hand clasped in his thumb tracing circles on my palm that sent sparks up my arm. When we reached the penthouse, he pulled me close in the elevator, his body radiating heat and tension. Emma. My name was a rough whisper against my hair. Tell me this is what you want, not because you owe me or because you're grateful. Tell me you want this. I looked up at him, at the man who'd become so much more than a transaction. I want this. I want you. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, and he lifted me, my legs wrapping around his waist as he carried me toward his bedroom, not the guest suite I'd been using, but his private space. The door closed behind us with a decisive click. What happened next wasn't gentle or uncertain. It was passion that had been building for weeks, chemistry that had been denied and suppressed, finally allowed to combust. His hands were everywhere, memorizing my body like territory to be claimed. I matched him, touch for touch, kiss for kiss, until we were tangled in sheets that smelled like him, and I couldn't tell where I ended and he began. Afterwards, lying in his arms with the city lights casting shadows across us, reality settled in. So we're really doing this, I said quietly, not as a transaction anymore. No more transactions. He pressed a kiss to my temple, just us, figuring it out as we go. Your family is going to make this difficult. Let them try. His arm tightened around me. You faced down my father, survived Alexei's threats, and chose me anyway. That's the definition of brave or insane. Probably both. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. Probably. We lay in comfortable silence, but I could feel the question hovering between us. What happens now? I finally asked. Now we announce the marriage publicly. Make it clear you're under Volkov protection. Build the life we're supposed to have instead of the performance we planned. He shifted to look at me, his expression serious. It won't be easy. There will be more threats, more tests, more nights when you question whether this was worth it. And on those nights, I'll remind you why you chose me, and you'll remind me why I chose you. His fingers traced my jaw. We'll be honest with each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, okay? I leaned into his touch. Then tell me something honest right now. That first night at the restaurant, when I saw you struggling with those plates, exhausted and invisible to everyone else, I recognized something in you, the same thing I see in myself when I look in the mirror. His voice was low, intimate. Someone fighting to survive in a world that doesn't give a damn whether they make it or not. I staged that blind date to prove people are shallow. But I came back to Lumiere looking for you because I wanted to see if that recognition was real. And was it? More than I expected. You're my opposite in every way that matters. Poor where I'm rich, honest where I'm calculating, hopeful where I'm cynical, but somehow, you're exactly what I needed. He kissed me softly. You make me want to be better than the sum of my violence and power. That's a lot of pressure. You can handle it. You've handled everything else I've thrown at you. I wanted to argue, to point out all the ways I was still terrified and uncertain, but exhaustion was pulling at me. The emotional weight of the evening finally catching up. Adrian felt it, pulling me closer and arranging the blankets around us. Sleep, he murmured. Tomorrow we deal with the rest of the world. Tonight, we just exist. I drifted off in his arms, feeling safer than I had any right to feel, in the embrace of a man who could order someone's death with a phone call. But safety, I was learning, wasn't about being free from danger. It was about having someone willing to stand between you and the chaos. Adrian Volkov was that person for me. And somehow, despite the insanity and the threats and the impossible circumstances, I'd become that person for him. The marriage that started as a transaction had transformed into something neither of us had planned for, something real, messy, and dangerously hopeful. 3 months later, standing beside Adrian at a charity gala while photographers captured us together, I caught my reflection in a mirror. Mrs. Emma Volkov stared back. No longer invisible, no longer drowning, no longer alone. Adrian's hand found mine, our rings catching the light. Regrets, he whispered. I looked up at the man who'd changed my life by offering me an impossible choice, the man who'd proven that sometimes the most dangerous gambles lead to the most unexpected happiness. Not a single one. His answering smile was private, genuine, meant only for me, and in that moment, surrounded by the glittering chaos of his world, I knew I'd made the right choice. Sometimes salvation comes from the most crime lord pretending to be poor, and a waitress brave enough to tell him the truth.